morning, Mindsetters. Welcome to Mindset Learn, the show that is proudly sponsored by Macmillan. You tuned in this hour with myself, Tebogo Precious, and Dave. How are you?
I'm good, and you, Tebogo?
I'm great, thanks. Now, tomorrow is Women's Day.
Absolutely, and we've got to honor our women.
True. And I'd like to find out from you, who's your favorite woman?
I'd have to start with my mother. Yeah, she carried me around for 9 months and drove me around to school and sports practices, and when I was in trouble at school, I'd always go running to her. So I had to go to her quite a bit, although she did give me a lot of hidings along the way, but I'm fine. I'm a better man for that today, and yeah.
Because of her.
Yeah.
That is so sweet. Now, Mindsetters, don't forget to post all your questions, your queries, and your comments on facebook.com/learnextra or mindsetlearn/live. We'll be doing business studies today. Could you kindly let them know what to expect in today's show?
Today we're going to be talking about business ownership, the different types of ownership, and what makes up the success and the failure factors for the different forms of ownership.
Okay. On that note, I'm just quickly going to see the questions, post the notes, make sure you download them, and you can carry on with the lesson.
Right. So, business ownership, it's one of my favorite sections in the matric syllabus, and it's a section that I hope you guys can actually go out and use one day. Now we get to the 5 different types of ownership that we're going to be discussing today: the sole proprietorship, a partnership, a close corporation, a private limited company, and a public limited company. Right, so in this lesson today, we're going to review the importance of choosing the correct form of ownership for a business. This is a favorite question when it comes to the matric examiners. They enjoy asking, what makes up the different forms of ownership, and if they're going to succeed or impede the business. Right. So key concepts to understand. So firstly, we're going to be talking about a sole proprietor. Now, a sole proprietor is, as the name says, it's just one person running the business there. Now, a lot of people get confused between the owner and the business, and the people who work within the business. Now, a sole proprietor, even though that there's only one owner in the business, there can still be a whole bunch of people that work under that person in the business. Now, there's some characteristics that you need to understand for sole proprietorship. And one of the first things is you only need a trading license to commence the business. Right, so if you guys want to tonight after the show, you can go and start your own sole proprietorship. Maybe it's selling coffee to your friends at school in the morning, or selling sweets at break, or maybe even toothpaste and a toothbrush after break so that they can brush their teeth if they don't lose them because of all of the cavities. Right, so you can go out there and you can start a sole proprietorship right now. There's no actual legal forms that you have to fill out. You can go there. Now, I'm sure a lot of you guys would have seen a lot of hawkers on the side of the road. Even those guys that sell stuff at the traffic lights, they could be classified as a sole proprietor. Right, so as I said, there is only one owner who assumes all the responsibility for the business. Right, so there's only one person in charge. There's no one else that they have to report to. It's just them by themselves. Right, the capital is supplied by the owner. Right, now later on you'll see that can be a bit of a problem. Right, now you might have grand ideas to go and start a massive business, but you only have so much money that you can contribute to the business. Now, this is one of the biggest drawbacks, is that there's unlimited liability in a sole proprietorship. So that means if the business gets into debt, the people that we owe money to, they can come and take all the assets away from the business, but also our own personal assets. Right, so I might own a little coffee stall that I have on the side of the road, and I've got my kettle and my cups and saucers, and my business goes into debt. The people that I owe money to can take away all of my business's assets as well as my personal assets, so like my TV at home, right, my couch, my PlayStation. They can come and take all of that stuff away because I've got unlimited liability. Right, and I'll explain that a little bit further along when we get to closed corporations, private companies, and public companies. Right, so the private possessions may be sold to settle the debts of the business, as I said there. Right. Another thing is that there is no legal entity for the business. You and the business are seen as one. So even though I might have my coffee stall and say my coffee burns someone, they will not sue my business, they will sue me, because my business and I are the same person. Now I'll explain to you as we get to the other forms of ownership how that differs. Right. So as I said there's no legal entity. Right. The owner is the one with the legal entity. Right. The one nice positive is the owner receives all of the profit. Right. So obviously the more money I make, the harder I'm going to work, the more productive I'm going to be. Now that goes into last week's lesson when we spoke about quality, where we want to be as productive as possible. The owner is going to be driven by money, so he's going to want to go out and make as much money as possible. Right. And then the owner is taxed on the profits of the business. Right. So, but he's taxed in his personal capacity. Now we're going to get to how that can impact the success of your business a little bit later. Right. The owner doesn't have to make all the decisions. Right. Financial statements don't need to be audited. Right. And it's easy to adapt to changing circumstances. Right. So I'm going to sell coffee and hot chocolate now in winter, but when summer comes along, I'm going to be selling cool drinks or lemonade. So I can change very quickly. Right. I don't have to ask other people for permission. I don't have to go to the other owners of the business and say, what should we do? Yeah, I can just say, right, today we're changing these things around. Right. So then our next form of ownership is a partnership. Right. Okay. So for a partnership to start, we only need to have an oral or written agreement. Right. Which is very, very easy to start. It's almost as easy to start as a sole proprietorship. So you and your friends, you might have a great idea. Let's go and make popcorn, or let's sell coffee to people. Let's sell lemonade to people on the side of the road. You can go and you can form a partnership yourselves there. Right. As with the sole proprietorship, easy and inexpensive to start. Right. Today, if Tebogo and I decided that we want to go into partnership together, we can start it right now after the lesson, say, right, we're going into a partnership, easy as pie, and it's done there. We're in a partnership together. Right, now this is very important. A lot of people make mistakes here. Right. There's a minimum of 2 partners. Now I've seen a lot of times people put there's a minimum of 1 partner. Right. If there's only 1 partner, then you're sole proprietorship. Right, so there's a minimum of 2 partners there. Now we get into the big drawbacks. Right, so ordinary partners are liable in an unlimited way for the debts of the business. So it's just like a sole proprietorship. Right, the debts of the business, right, are also become your personal debts that you have to settle. Now one of the biggest drawbacks is partners are jointly and severally liable for the debts of the partnership. So if Tebogo and I are in a partnership and I bring 2 million rand into this partnership, and Tebogo unfortunately racks up a whole bunch of debts, even though it's got nothing to do with our partnership, I still have to pay for that debt. I have to cover that debt because we are in a partnership together. Now, how fair would that be? Right, now you don't want to be in that situation.
Unfair.
You want to protect yourself, you want to protect your business, and you want to protect your money. Just as a sole proprietorship, there is no legal entity. So Tebogo and I are selling lemonade, and someone is allergic to lemons, and they have a big allergic reaction, and they want to sue us. They cannot sue Tebogo and Dave's lemonade stand. They're going to sue us in our personal capacity, and they can take away our personal assets, such as my car, Tebogo's phone, right? All of our personal things. Right. Each partner is to contribute capital in the form of cash, assets, or services rendered to the partnership. Right, so you have to contribute something to the partnership, and the partnership has to be for profit. Right, let's go on to the next one, to a closed corporation there. Right. Okay, a CC must be registered with the Registrar of Closed Corporations. So our business has to be registered. So people can look up, they can go to the Registrar of Closed Corporation and they can say, right, is this business registered? Is it allowed to trade in that? So now it becomes a little bit more official. You can't just all of a sudden, after tonight's show, say, right, I'm starting a closed corporation. Right? You have to go through and you have to register the whole business. Now, South Africa is one of the few countries in the world that has a CC, and it's easy and not expensive to establish a CC. So it was quite a nice way to get young entrepreneurs into the business world by giving them this form of ownership to start. Now, all we need is a minimum of 1, and we have a maximum of 10 members. Right, now you guys are going to start to see that the owners of the different businesses, the forms of ownership, are called different things. A sole proprietor is a sole proprietor. In a partnership, the owners of the business are called partners. Right, in a closed corporation, they are called members. So in a closed corporation, we're going to have 1 to 10 members. Right, now the nice thing that is about a closed corporation is members have limited liability, right? Because the business has its own legal entity. Right, so what that means is we've got 2 million rand in assets in the business, right? That we've invested and we bought. Now the business gets sued for 3 million rand. Now the people that are going to sue the business can only take the assets that belong to the business. They cannot take away my personal assets, because now my business is seen as a legal entity, which is different from me. Yes, I own the business, but the business and myself are seen as 2 separate people, which is quite nice. It takes away that risk of you losing everything that could happen in a sole proprietorship or a partnership. So it gives us a lot more security. Right, now this is another part. There is continuity until members decide to deregister the business. So in a sole proprietorship and a partnership, there's no continuity of existence. In a sole proprietorship, if the owner dies, the business dies. It does not exist anymore. If Tebogo and I go into partnership, and Tebogo decides that she wants to move down to Cape Town and we can't become partners anymore, the partnership dissolves and does not exist anymore. When in a closed corporation, if one of the members leaves or decides to sell their percentage in the firm, right, the company will carry on. That's why you'll see a lot of companies out there have been going on for over 100 years, because there's continuity of existence. Right, so the name must be registered and must end with CC. This is very, very important. That's one of the characteristics. They're going to come there, they're going to ask you in your final exams, what do the names of these different businesses, what must they end with? And if it's a closed corporation, must end with a CC. Okay. Now the capital is limited to the maximum contribution of 10 members. Right, we can't go out and say, hey, we want 20 people contributing to us here. Okay, so it's limited to what we can bring there. Right, let's go on to a private company. Right, now a private company has got a lot more legislation that they have to deal with. So we must complete a memorandum of association and be registered with the Registrar of Companies. Right, so you have to go out there, you have to register it, you have to comply with the laws that are in place there. Unlike a sole proprietorship and a partnership where you can just start it anytime you want. Right, it is often very time consuming and expensive to register, but there's a lot more benefits that you can get out of starting a private limited company compared to a closed corporation, a partnership, and a sole proprietorship. Right, it has a minimum of 1 and a maximum of 50 shareholders. So the owners of this company are called shareholders. So we might only need 1, right? Or we could go all the way up to a maximum of 50. Now that's going to bring in a lot more advantages for us. Now we can get a lot more capital from a lot more people. Right. Shareholders contribute to the capital by buying shares in the company. So if you want, you can go and buy shares in the company. You can buy a part of that company. The name must be registered and must end with Pty Limited. Can you see how it's different there from the closed corporation? Pty Limited stands for Propriety Limited. Right, the business has continuity and it has its own legal entity. Right, the company pays income tax on its profits. Right, where the sole proprietorship, the actual individual had to pay the tax. Right, let's go to a Right, so if you look at a public company, it's very, very similar to a private limited company in that the only difference is that we have a minimum of 7 shareholders, right? But we have unlimited shareholders that we can have. It all depends on how many shares the company has. So if the company has 2 million shares, right, we can have 2 million shareholders or 2 million different owners. It's the same as a private limited company in that you've got to fill out a whole bunch of memorandum of association forms. It's a very, very complicated process. In order to be listed on the JSE, you have to satisfy certain criteria, which takes many years to build up. You can't all of a sudden tonight say, right, I'm going to start a public company. You have to make sure that you satisfy a lot of the criteria. So, but a private and a public limited company are very, very similar in the way that they run. A public company will end with LTD at the end of it, where the private company had Pty Limited. Right, so they're very, very similar indeed with that, and you guys can go out and you need to be able to distinguish between the two and know what's happening between them there.
Yeah, I think it's time for a quick break. Mindsetters, just take a quick break to ponder on whatever he's being teaching, business ownerships. I think it's very interesting. Make sure you understand the difference between public and private corporations. Until in a few minutes, we'll see you guys after the break. Welcome back, Mindsetters. Now I'm quickly going to read a very important announcement before we carry on with business. And it reads, are you interested in doing grade 10 to 12 CAPS content development, review, and video presentations? If so, visit www.mindset.co.za/learn/jobs for more information, opportunities, and submission of applications. With that said, Dave, you can carry on with the show.
Right, let's carry on with the different forms of ownership. Now we're going to go into the different parts of them, and they enjoy asking these in your exams, such as the capacity, taxation, who are the owners, how is the profit shared. So let's start with the sole proprietorship first, right? So the nice thing about the sole proprietorship is that the business is easy to control because it is small, right? Your business isn't going to be huge if you're a sole proprietor. You're not going to have thousands of people working underneath you. Your business is going to be small, right? So you can control it. You can control your lemonade stand on the side of the road, right? And personal attention of the owner is given, right? So the sole proprietor, they'll know all of their customers. They'll know exactly what to expect. One of the failures of a sole proprietor is that it is a very small enterprise, and it is difficult to appoint good qualified workers because the enterprise cannot compete with the salaries paid by the bigger enterprises. All right, and one of the biggest things as well that failures for it is it's difficult for one person to control all the business functions. Now, if you look at Richard Branson, in his business, he can employ the best people to operate those different parts of the business. Where a sole proprietor, you have to know all of that stuff by yourself. You have to know the operations by yourself, the marketing by yourself. You have to know the finance by yourself. So there's a lot of pressure on you, right? Now the taxation in a sole proprietorship is added to any other income the owner receives, and the owner is taxed as an individual taxpayer on his or her share of the profit, right? So now in South Africa, the highest tax rate that we get is 40% for an individual. So you'll have to pay 40% of everything that you earn if you're in the highest tax bracket. Where if you look at companies, they only pay 28%. So in a sole proprietorship, we're going to have to pay a lot more tax than companies would. Right? Now just think of that. You're going to be losing a lot more of your profits to the tax man, and you've got nothing to show for it there. Right, so income tax is paid by the owner and depends on the annually announced scales announced by the Minister of Finance, and if the scales are increased, the owner will have less profit. Right, that's a massive thing there, right? So if the individual, income tax goes up, we're going to have to end up paying more tax. So it means we've got less money for our business, less money to invest in our business, so we're not going to become as productive as we want. Right. Management, right. The owner has full control over the way in which the business is managed. Right. The owner is the management of the business as well. They are one. Right. So that's something that a lot of people get confused with there. So failure may take the wrong decisions because there's nobody else to consult. Right? Sometimes you don't know that you're doing the wrong thing, but because there's no one else to talk to, you end up failing there. Right, the capital, because the owner is the only person responsible for the success of the business, the capital will be utilized economically. Right, if you have to pay for something yourself, you're going to look after it a lot better than if someone just gave it to you. Right, and that's the same in the business. The owner is contributing the capital, so he's going to look after it a lot better. Right, the failure is though that it's limited to the amount that the owner alone can contribute. Right, so if I can only contribute 100 Rand in capital, that's all I've got there. I might need 1,000 Rand to start my business, but all I've got is 100 Rand. There's nothing I can do there. Division of profits. The owner is the only person receiving the profit, right? And the failure of that could be greed could result in unethical practices as to earn more, right? In terms of legislation, only need to adhere to the requirements of the Income Tax Act 58 of 1962, right? And obviously a failure is that we are not a legal entity. Right, let's go on to partnerships. Right, so capacity, the business is usually small with all the partners active. Right. Now, the failure of the capacity is that there's unlimited liability for the partners, which is a bad thing. We don't want that. I don't want my partner going out racking up lots of debt and then unfortunately my house gets taken away. I had nothing to do with that debt. But in a partnership, that is the way it works. Taxation, very similar to the sole proprietorship, where we pay income tax, right, on what the individual partners pay on their income, right. Obviously, a failure of that is that the income tax is dependent on the Minister of Finance, just as a sole proprietorship, right. So you'll see that a partnership and a sole proprietorship are very, very similar. Just like a private limited company and a public company are also very similar to each other. Right, the management, the partners are jointly and actively involved in managing the partnership. Right, that's what they do. They're all going to work together to run the partnership. A massive failure is they must get agreement from other partners during decision making and before transactions can be done. So now imagine you're in your classroom and as a class you all have to decide you have to make a decision together. Right, how many times have you got stuck because people are like, no, I don't want to do that, I rather want to do this. Now that's one of the drawbacks of a partnership, is that everyone might not agree and you might need to make a decision quickly, but you can't because no one agrees. Capital, obviously one of the success factors is that there's more than one person contributing to the capital, right? But at the same time, a lack of capital because not all partners contribute cash. Some contribute assets or their services. Right, so I might say, right, I'm a really good accountant, I'm going to do all the accounting for the business. That is my contribution. That doesn't mean that the business has got the money for that. Right. And the division of profits are divided between the partners as stipulated in the partnership agreement. So if Tebogo and I are going to a partnership, I will get 60% of the profits and she'll get 40% because that's according to our partnership agreement, unless she wants to negotiate for some more beforehand. Right, a failure, because the profit is divided according to the partnership agreement, it may be that a hard-working partner receives less profit than the others who didn't contribute the same effort to the partnership. which is going to create a little bit of animosity and people might not like working together. Legislation, also only need to adhere to the Income Tax Act 58 of 1962. Right, so it's very easy. We don't have much legislation that we have to adhere to. Right, let's go on to a closed corporation. Right, so the success, easy and inexpensive to start. For a couple of £100, you can go and buy yourself a closed corporation and you can start trading under that closed corporation name. Right, one of the failures in terms of capacity is not in a position to compete with bigger enterprises. So closed corporations, they cannot take on the captains of industry because they are not big enough to do that. Taxation. A closed corporation pays tax on the income brought into the business after the expenses of running the business have been deducted. Right. Now this is very important. The profit of the CC belongs to the CC. It belongs to the business. Yes, the business belongs to the owners. So if I own a CC, the CC belongs to me, but that money, the profit that the CC raised, stays within that CC. Right, that does not come to me. Right, that goes into that whole legal entity because the CC is a different legal entity to me, to myself. Right, so the CC pays income tax at the same rate of companies, which is 28%. Now, many of you will agree that paying only 28% tax is a lot better than paying 40%. Let's look at some of the failures there. If the profits are small, it might not be a good idea to form a CC, as a CC or a company tax might be higher than an individual tax rate. So that's only if you are earning money under the tax threshold. So certain people only will pay zero tax if they earn under, say, 66,000 Rand a year. Where if you're in a CC, you might earn 66,000 Rand for the year, but you still have to pay that 28% tax. Management, right, there's no separation between the ownership and the management, right. So members who are the owners of the CC have to manage the company as well. Failures, also decision making can be time consuming as all members have to agree first. Right, so that's going back to your class. Everyone's got to have their say and say, right, this is what we want to do. And we're going to have to schedule a meeting to arrange a meeting, which wastes a lot of time. Right, and we don't want that because sometimes there's an opportunity that you need to take advantage of, and if you waste time, you're not going to be able to take advantage of that opportunity. Right, the capital, right, so now we can get a lot more capital because up to 10 persons can contribute, but at the same time, that can hamper us because we are limited to 10 people that can supply us with capital. Right, so the division of profits, right, profit after taxation is divided between the members according to the percentage interest of each member of the business. So if Taboko and I are in a closed corporation and I've got 50% and she's got 50%, we're going to get 50% of the profit. If I've got 30% and she's got 70%, she's going to get 70% of the profit, I'm going to get 30% of the profit. So it's how much interest we own in that business. Right. One of the failures is a member who contributes less capital will receive less profits. Right, now let's look at the legislation. So first legislation is Closed Corporations Act of 69 of 1984 that we have to adhere to. The CC has its own legal entity. That means people can sue the CC if need be. All right, failure, it has to comply with the Closed Corporations Act, right, and the Income Tax Act. Right, so we've got to adhere to a lot more different legislation. All right, let's go into a private company.
Before we start with the private company, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
It comes from owners, and he says, but what does PTY Limited tell us about the private company and Limited about the public company?
Okay, well, Propriety Limited, the PTY Limited, means that only people that we want to own shares in our business can buy it. So if I want you to invest in my business, I can say, please come and buy shares in my business.
Okay.
But if I have my PTY Limited company and you say to me, I want to buy shares in your business, and I'm like, no, I don't like you. I don't want you buying shares in my business. You can't. Where a public company, where it's just limited, anyone can go and buy shares. You can go buy shares in some of the biggest companies in South Africa if you wanted, and they can't stop you from doing that.
Okay. Yeah.
Right, that's
That
a very
was,
good question. I hope that explained that a lot better to you there.
Thanks.
So let's look at a private company here. So we are relatively bigger than other forms of ownership, right? Right. One of the failures is we cannot compete with public companies. Our taxation, we pay tax on the income brought into the business after the expenses of running the business have been deducted. And it's, as I said there, 28%. Right. Failure, companies have to pay secondary tax of 10% if they issue dividends. Right. Now the management, this is where it comes in here. Management and ownership are legally separated. So the owners of the company do not necessarily manage the company. Right. The owners will appoint directors to manage the company for them. So you can go and buy shares in a private limited company, and you can say, right, I would like to appoint Tebogo as the director of my company because she knows what she's doing there. And you can just sit back and relax, and you don't have to do anything. So can you start to see there's a lot of advantages to opening this form of ownership here. Right. A failure is shareholders are not actively involved in managing the company. Right. Now, one of the success factors for capital is that we have 50 members can buy shares in the company. So I can raise a lot more money if I want to. Right. One of the failures is, though, is that shares are not freely transferred. So I can only invite people that I want to buy shares in my company. I can't go to the public and say, hey, come and buy here. Right. The division of profits. Right. The profits belong to the company. Right. Now, one of the failures of that is the market value of shares can decrease when the dividends paid out to shareholders is low. Right, now let's look at the legislation that we must comply with. So we've got the Companies Act 61 of 1973. Right, then we have to comply with all of these other rules that they set out there for when we start a company. Now you'll see that in a public company, the capacity very, very similar. Taxation also at 28%. Right, now if we look at the management, they're once again separated, but we have to have at least 2 directors in our company. So we're getting a lot more people in there, right? But a minimum of 7 shareholders. Right, now the capital, this is what makes it very, very successful. It issues a prospectus and sells shares to the public to a maximum amount as registered in the Memorandum of Association. So if I got 2 million shares, I can raise so much more capital. Now, I'm going to hand over to Tebogo there. We'll be going through an essay question after the break.
After the break. Now, before we go quickly, let me just read one post from one of our mindsetters, and it comes from Sir Pibaloi, and she says, business is my favorite subject. I'm so going to tune in until the end of the show. That's the spirit, guys. We'll see you in a few minutes. Welcome back, Matrix. Now I'm quickly going to read 2 posts before we start with the essay questions. And this one comes from Rifilwe Sereo, and she says, yes, I am watching. I never let it to pass. Thanks, Mindset Learn Extra. You are important to us, Matrix. And then I have just one more. It's not a question. I'm just going to take you far off, and this is from one of our other attentive mindsetters, Jabu, and then he says the minimum number of partners is 2 to 20 and not unlimited, which was in the note earlier.
Yeah, you're 100% right there. Now, that is for our current curriculum, but the South African Companies Act and laws have changed, so they've had it from 2 to unlimited. So that'll be coming into place from next year, but well spotted there. If you're in my class, so I'll definitely give you a high five there. Yeah, that's well spotted there. All right, so we're going to be going on to the essay question now. This is they really like asking this type of question either in your upcoming prelim or in your final exam. So let's just read what they have to say here. All right, so 3 friends, Jabulani, Melissa, and Karen, are running a well-established partnership business in Soweto. They manufacture, supply, and install kitchen cupboards directly to the public. Their turnover is 30 million per year, and they make a net profit of 9 million per year. They've been in business for the past 10 years. They are triple BEE compliant, right? So let's see what the question is asking us. The partners want to change from a partnership to a public company. Advise them on any 4 factors that may affect both the success and the failure of the new form of ownership. All right. Recommend whether they should change to the new form of ownership and motivate your answer. So you're going to start with your introduction again, right, where you're just going to talk briefly about what you think they should do. Now, you're going to go into your main body. So our main body is we're going to discuss what 4 factors are going to impact on the success or failure of the business, of the partnership, and the public company. And then our conclusion is going to be, as I said, yeah, motivate your answer. Right, motivate your answer. Okay, so let's see what they had to say here. So our introduction is, the following factors will be considered because they contribute to the success or failure of the business enterprise. Right, there are legal procedures and requirements that these friends must comply with when forming a public company. Right, the correct division of profits creates more income and is important for the success of the business. Right, so you can see what they're going to be discussing here. So firstly, they're going to go into capacity. So you list the capacity, which we discussed for all the different forms of ownership. So the capacity of the company refers to the size of the business operation. Right, so they're not a small business. Right, they have 30 million rand of turnover every year. That's a lot more than the little vendors that just sell 100 rand or 200 rands worth of refreshments every day. 30 million rand, that is a lot of money that they're making. So they should be looking for a bigger form of ownership, right? Should the company be involved in manufacturing or the production process, then they will require a large amount of capital, right? So remember, for a public company, we can go out and we can get a lot of capital. We can invite people to come and invest in our business, right? So we'll be giving up some form of the ownership of the business, but in return for that, we're getting a lot more money in. And with that money, we can grow our business a lot more. Right. So success. The company acquires a large amount of capital to start up the company. Right. So if I've got 1 million shares out there, and I go and sell each share for 10 rand, that means I'm getting 10 million rand into the business that I can use to grow the business. I can go and buy new machines. I can expand the business, which is going to make me more productive and make me more money. Further capital may also be required in the future finance expansion, and it requires a stable cash flow to fund the operations. Right. A company that is well managed will lead to future growth. And when BBBEE compliant, the company will have easier access to capital on the JSE. Right. Now, one of the failures of this is the formation of a public company will definitely mean a large business operation in the manufacturing and production industry. Right. So sometimes the bigger your business goes, the more headaches you get, because now you have to worry about more staff. That means more issues. You need to bring in specialist HR practitioners. So it's a very delicate balancing act. You have to see where you want to go in the future, right? And that comes again to the beginning of your vision and mission. Do you just want to be some local manufacturing business, or do you want to be a world-class business, right? This capacity requires sufficient cash flow, and should this not be available, then this will lead to the failure of the company, right? Okay, now let's look at the next one. Is legislation. A public company must be registered in terms of the Companies Act number 61 of 1973, and the public company becomes a legal person when it is registered, right? So that means that people can sue the company, right? The owners and the company are seen as two different entities, right? If the company does something wrong, people can sue the company. They cannot necessarily go after the owner and their personal assets. Right, the shareholders have limited liability as per legislation. So that means I'm only going to lose the amount of money that are invested in the business. They cannot come and take away my personal car or my personal home. Right. The company is sued, and the shareholders do not run the risk of losing their personal possessions, as I said there. Right. So the success is limited liability of a public company. Right. And this also means that the ability to take risks also allows the company to show growth. Right. We have to take risks. Right. In life, every day you take a risk. Every time you cross the road, you take a risk. Right. If you just want to play it safe, you can stay at home in your bed all day and nothing will happen to you. But you're not going to get an education because you have to cross the road to get to school. So it's all about taking risks. And with businesses, the higher the risk, the higher the reward you should be looking for. Now, one of the failures is it is very lengthy to establish procedures down by the Companies Act. It may lead to the failure of the company. It takes so long to become a public company. You have to have audited financial statements for years and show that you've got enough money in there. It's not just something that can happen overnight, right? And sometimes you need that capital coming in straight away that you can get your business up and running, where if it's going to take a long time to get there, you might miss out on an opportunity. Okay. The subsequent legal requirements, such as the auditing and publication of audited financial statements, may lead to failure of the company. Right? Another thing, when you're a public company, you have to have these audited financial statements, and a lot of times you'll see them in newspapers. That means your competition can see how well you're doing. And if you're not doing too well, they can use that information to their advantage and go out and decimate your company. And companies may find it difficult to meet the above requirements. Right. Capital. Right. The size of the business and the type of the product manufactured will determine the amount of capital required. If Toboko and I are going to start a company and we're going to make lemonade, all we need is lemons, water, and some sugar, and then we're done. But if we decide we're going to start a car company and we're going to make cars, we've got to bring in all of those machines, those robots, so many different things that cost a lot of money, right? So that's going to depend on what type of business you're in, is how much capital you're going to need. So companies can raise extremely large amounts of capital in terms of legislation, right? And companies raise capital by selling shares to the public. Right, so if I'm my public company, I can sell shares to the public, but the one drawback of that is that I lose control of my company. Other people can take over my company by buying all the shares out of there. Now that's something called a hostile takeover, which you guys should have learned. So we could lose our company altogether because someone else wants to take over it. So the success, a public company sells shares to the public, and the company has a large number of shareholders who contribute to a larger share capital, so we can get a lot more money from them. However, failure, poor financial results of the company may lead to shareholders selling their shares in the company. Right, so there was a large company a decade ago that went bankrupt. At one stage they were R5 a share. When the company finally, the JSE suspended their trading, they were trading at 15 cents a share. Right, now you'll see there's a lot of companies that have got their shares are very, very cheap. It's known as penny stocks. You can go buy shares in a company for 10 cents. I mean, if you got a rand, you can go and buy 10 shares there. It's quite nice. You can say to your friends you own a company, because you actually do own a bit of a company.
True.
For 1 rand. Not a great company, but still you can go out there. I mean, you look at some of the large tech companies out there, they're selling at shares at $900 a share. Right, which is quite phenomenal. Right, poor control by the board of directors over the share capital may also lead to the failure of the company. Right, so there's been numerous cases of companies that where the board of directors have been very irresponsible and they've lost so much money. Right, and they cannot get that money back. So that's quite a risk. And that's why you have to make sure you appoint the correct people to manage your company if you're a shareholder. Right, taxation. Right, public company is responsible for paying tax on the profits. Right, and they are taxed at a fixed rate as determined by the Minister of Finance for that particular tax year, right? So the success of that is that companies have more opportunities to reduce their tax liability. This can be achieved through allowances, which can be claimed as company expenses. All right, so if I own a public company and I use a cell phone, it can be used through the company and it will be claimed as an expense. Right, so I can get a lot more expenses through the company, but still have benefit to me. Right, now one of the failures is the high tax rate on profits of companies may lead to companies closing down. Now, the highest income tax rate in South Africa is at 40%, where companies are at 28%. So it could potentially be a problem if the income tax rate goes down, but for the moment, it's good to be in a company there. Right. And companies may experience cash flow problems when paying provisional tax, and this may lead to failure of the company. So cash flow, I don't have money to pay my employees. If I don't pay my employees, are they going to want to work there? No, that means I'm not going to be productive. If I'm not productive, I'm not selling any goods to my customers. Therefore, they're not going to buy anything, and it's a downward spiral. Right, so we need to make sure that we monitor our cash flow. Right, division of profits. Shareholders share in the profits of a company. They receive profits in the form of dividends. Now, the nice thing about dividends is that it's taxed at a lower rate, and it's your share in the company's profits. Now, they receive interim dividends checks, and final dividends are declared on the profits of a company at the end of the financial year. Now, different companies have different financial year ends. So at the end of their financial year, they'll say, right, we're going to issue a dividend of R1 per share. So if you own 1,000 shares, that means you'll be getting R1,000 check in the post, which is quite nice. Now, the success of this is high profits and good returns. Shareholders indicate the success of the company. Right, so the more dividends I'm going to earn, right, the higher the share price is going to be, so people are going to want to be in that company. They're going to want a piece of that company. Right, and the values of shares increases as there's growth in the company. Right, now one of the failures of this is low profits or losses sustained by the company leads to a failure of the company. Right, so if the company is not doing well, people are going to want to pull their money out of the company that they invested in. Right, and if a lot of people start pulling their money out, that means the share price is going to drop, and people aren't going to want to invest in that company. It's going to be a bad reputation there. Right, management. The management of a company lies within the board of directors. Now, we appoint those people to run our company, right? So the management is in the capable hands of the board of directors, who will ensure the success for the company. So Richard Branson, in his companies, he appoints directors that he thinks are experts in their field. So we're going to have the best of the best people that we think should run our company. Right, and the directors are paid directors' fees, who will drive the company to success. Right, now, one of the failures is poor management by the board of directors will lead to failure. Now, we've seen that over and over again. If the board of directors do not know what they're doing, they're not going to be able to run the business properly. That goes back to the beginning. Remember the mission and the vision. If they don't know where they're going, the company is going to fail. So that's why you need to make sure that you have the best people working there. Right? And directors not acting in terms of their appointment to the company may lead to the company to fail. Right. So if we look at our conclusion, right, to start a public company involves legal matters that must be complied with. Right. So you've got to comply with a whole bunch of legal laws. You've got to make sure that you comply with how much turnover you have. So it's a whole massive thing. You can't just wake up tomorrow morning and say, right, I'm starting a public company. Right. You've got to comply with a whole bunch of legal requirements. Right. And when managing capacity, legislation, capital, and taxation, and profits, well, the company can be successful. Right, so we've got to make sure that we manage all of those things. If we manage our tax efficiently, we're going to be successful. We're going to have a lot more capital. And if we manage that capital, we're going to make sure that we are a lot more successful out there. So, Bocho, do we have any questions from our mindsetters?
No.
Right, so let's go back. I've got a nice table for you guys that we can go through. Right, so now we're going to look at the different characteristics of the different forms of ownership. Now, it's very important that you guys know this. So if we look at the characteristics of a partnership and a close corporation, and what I suggest that you guys do is that you have this table down for all of the 5 different forms of ownership so that you guys can see the differences between the two. So we're going to be going into a partnership and a close corporation. So who owns a partnership? Right? It is owned by the 2 to 20 partners. Close corporation by the 1 to 10 members. Right, so look there. Partners, members, right. Legal personality of a partnership. Right. It is not a legal person. Right. When we look at a close corporation, it is a legal person. Can you see the difference between the two there? Right, the autonomy. Right. There is none in a partnership. In a close corporation, 1 to 10 members or stakeholders there. Is there continuity of existence in a partnership? No, it lacks continuity. But let's look at the close corporation. Yes, it has continuity. It can continue. Right, the formation, right, can be formed orally or in writing. Right, and a partnership agreement must be signed. Close corporation must have a founding statement, must wait for a certificate of incorporation. Taxation, in their personal capacity, for a closed corporation, business pays tax on its profits. And adaptability to change is good. And for a closed corporation, right, it's fair. Right, over to Tebogo.
Yeah, I had a reply from, I don't know if you remember, one of our mindsetters who asked about PTY and the difference between that and private companies, public companies. He replied just now saying that thanks for the answer, it was more than satisfying.
Right, that's good to know.
So yeah, I'm glad most of our mindsetters are actually enjoying the show. And thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. Thank you to Macmillan for making the show so special and making it possible. Thanks, Dave, for the wonderful lesson. And to all the beautiful women out there, especially my mom, you are the woman of strength, courage, wisdom, love. The list just goes on. Enjoy your beautiful day tomorrow. Until next time, though, stay blessed.